Just before a high-stakes meeting between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping at the APEC summit in South Korea, China made its move. Instead of waiting to see how the talks would unfold, Beijing took matters into its own hands, quietly but decisively. While Washington showed up armed with new threats of tariffs, China launched a powerful counterstroke. Fresh export control rules targeting the world's most vital resources, rare earth metals. The message couldn't have been clearer. Whoever controls the materials that fuel modern technology controls the future. Every electric car, smartphone, jet engine, and precision missile depends on these elements, and China holds the reins. While the US was focused on isolating Beijing, China was busy tightening regional partnerships, finalizing a new trade deal with ASEAN that could redraw Asia's entire economic map. It wasn't a defensive move. It was strategy in motion. As the world's eyes were fixed on the APEC stage, China was already shaping what comes next. A future where global power shifts quietly but steadily toward the east. Rare earth metals might sound obscure, but they're the silent backbone of everything high-tech. Over decades, China built near-total dominance, mining about 70% of global supply and refining almost 90%. That didn't happen by accident. While others treated these elements like ordinary minerals, Beijing built an entire industrial empire around them, from mining and refining to magnet production and recycling. Those magnets drive electric vehicles, spin wind turbines, and guide advanced weapons. Controlling this supply chain means holding one of the most strategic levers of modern power. That's why when Beijing rolled out new export rules on October 9, 2025, it wasn't just business policy. It was a geopolitical statement. The new framework, issued under Regulation 61, created a sweeping licensing system for every stage of rare earth trade and technology. Foreign buyers now need direct approval from China's Ministry of Commerce, and permission can be refused if their end use involves defense, advanced chips, or dual-use systems. But the biggest twist came with a clause echoing America's own chip sanctions. China extended its authority far beyond its borders. Any product made abroad that contains Chinese rare earth store technology could now need Beijing's green light before export. To make sure no one could slip through the cracks, China introduced what's now known as the 0.1% rule. Starting December 1st, even if a product includes the tiniest trace, just 0.1% of Chinese materials, it falls under these controls. A magnet produced in Germany, a motor built in Japan, or a chip machine assembled in the Netherlands, if any part of it ties back to China, it's under Beijing's oversight. Officially, the move was framed as a matter of national security, not retaliation. But its timing, right before Trump and Xi's meeting, spoke volumes. It was a reminder that headlines may be dominated by tariffs and trade threats, but true power lies in controlling the building blocks of modern industry. The ripple effect was instant. Defense and tech companies worldwide scrambled to assess what it meant for them. In Washington, policymakers quickly realized that what looked like a supply chain issue had just turned into a national security concern. Yet China played it cool. On October 12th, the Ministry of Commerce clarified that this wasn't about cutting anyone off. It was about oversight, ensuring materials were used for legitimate civilian purposes. Officials stressed that China's approach aligned with international norms and was designed to protect its own security. This wasn't retaliation, it was quiet domination. Control without conflict, a carefully calculated move that left the rest of the world uneasy. And while markets tried to interpret Beijing's next steps, China was already looking ahead, preparing to extend its reach not through confrontation, but through collaboration. When China announced its new export controls, the global response was instant. Within hours, markets began to stir. Prices for rare earth magnets, the tiny but crucial components used in everything from electric vehicles to guided missiles, started climbing sharply. Across Asia and Europe, suppliers were thrown into a frenzy, racing to renegotiate existing contracts before the new rules came into effect. Manufacturers feared that even routine shipments could now face sudden delays or rejections under China's updated licensing system. Analysts at Nomura and ING didn't take long to sound the alarm. They estimated that a mere 2-week disruption in the supply of rare earths could impact industries collectively, worth over $1.2 trillion. These weren't abstract figures. They represented real factories, real products, and real economies. The automotive sector, defense manufacturing, renewable energy, and consumer electronics all stood at risk of cascading slowdowns. Japan, perhaps the most exposed among advanced economies, reacted almost immediately. Nearly 60% of its rare earth imports come directly from China, an uncomfortable dependency for a nation built in precision engineering. Tokyo quietly began brokering emergency supply deals with Australia and Vietnam, hoping to establish a safety net. The European Union, facing similar vulnerabilities, assembled an emergency task force to evaluate how China's move could disrupt the continent's growing industries in batteries, wind turbines, and electric transportation. But the task force's findings were sobering. The world simply didn't have enough alternative sources. Developing new mines could take a decade or more. And even if new deposits were found, the refining process, the transformation of raw ore into usable high-grade materials, remains a Chinese specialty. Beijing had spent decades mastering the most complex stages of rare earth production, while the West looked away, distracted by cheaper costs and environmental convenience. In Washington, officials called it economic warfare, an act of coercion meant to remind the world who controls the modern supply chain. But the markets read something far more subtle. This wasn't a weapon. It was a demonstration of power, quiet and calculated. China wasn't cutting anyone off completely. It was simply choosing who to serve first, how much to export, and under what terms. The message was unmistakable. Control the flow, and you control the future. Across the Western world, companies began hoarding whatever supplies they could find. Defense contractors warned that without a stable supply of Chinese magnets, production timelines could extend by months. Automobile makers started exploring recycled materials, and some even looked toward synthetic substitutes. But innovation takes time. And time was the one resource everyone was running out of. The irony didn't go unnoticed. For decades, Western corporations had willingly outsourced the dirtiest, most labor-intensive, and most environmentally hazardous stages of production to China. That outsourcing created efficiency, but also dependency. Now, as the global economy shifted, those same cost-saving decisions had transformed into strategic vulnerabilities. Every attempt to de-risk or diversify supply chains only exposed how deeply the world's manufacturing web was woven around China. While others scrambled to react, Beijing moved quietly towards something much larger. Not just defensive policy, but a new economic blueprint. The next chapter of that plan was unveiled in Kuala Lumpur. As Washington doubled down on tariffs and threats, China focused on alliances. On October 28, 2025, during the ASEAN summit, Beijing and 10 Southeast Asian nations officially signed the China-ASEAN Free Trade Area 3.0 agreement, a pact representing a population of over 2.1 billion people and a combined GDP exceeding $23 trillion. There were no dramatic press conferences or fiery speeches. Instead, it was quiet, deliberate, and meticulously planned. A moment that marked the birth of one of the largest economic zones outside North America and the European Union. Unlike older trade deals that focused mainly on tariffs, this one looked to the future. It introduced entirely new chapters on the digital economy, green technology, infrastructure development, small business cooperation, product standards, and faster cross-border trade. Within a decade, 92% of goods traded between China and ASEAN countries are expected to move without tariffs. By 2027, joint programs focusing on digital infrastructure and environmental sustainability will be in full swing. And behind all this activity lies a clear ambition: to transform Southeast Asia into a high-tech manufacturing powerhouse, powered not by Western financing, but by Chinese investment, technology, and expertise. Across the region, projects are already underway. Solar farms in Indonesia, data centers in Malaysia, green transport systems in Thailand, all backed by Chinese banks and regional development funds, not Western lenders. More and more of these trade deals are being settled in yuan, bypassing the dollar entirely. Chinese banks have expanded their clearing operations in Kuala Lumpur, Bangkok, and Jakarta, quietly laying the foundation for a self-sustaining financial ecosystem. This subtle but strategic transition is gradually reshaping global finance. As settlements in yuan rise, the need for US dollars, and consequently the global appetite for US Treasury bonds, begins to fall. For decades, those bonds were viewed as the ultimate symbol of stability. But now, even that image is starting to blur. Investors are noticing. The share of long-term US debt held by Asian nations has been declining for the second consecutive year, while funds flowing into China-ASEAN infrastructure and tech projects continue to rise. The balance of power in global trade and finance is slowly tilting eastward. The emerging system being built across Asia isn't confrontational. It's parallel. Instead of challenging the West head-on, China is constructing an alternative network where cooperation and control blend seamlessly. It's a strategy rooted in patience, one that values systems over slogans, results over rhetoric. And as these changes solidify, the rhythm of the global economy itself is shifting. The quiet, steady pulse of growth now beats from the east. From new factories in Vietnam, financial centers in Singapore, and research hubs in Shenzhen. The rules of global commerce are no longer written in one capital, but shaped by a region that's learning to stand on its own terms. So the question facing the world is no longer just about competition. It's about adaptation. Can the United States and its allies adjust to a new era where influence is shared, not dominated? Or has China already rewritten the blueprint of global trade, turning quiet control into lasting power? Tell us what you think. Is this the beginning of a new economic order, or just another cycle in history repeating itself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. The world is changing faster than anyone expected, and the next chapter might already be underway.